My friends, welcome to this tutorial about creating games with Solarus. Today we will talk about treasures, how to give something to the player. So treasures can have different forms. You can let the hero just pick up something on the ground, and they can obtain this item, or the item can be in a chest, or it can be dropped by an enemy, among other options. But in all cases, your treasures are listed here, so in the items folder. So we call this an item. That means something that the player can obtain. Sometimes items can have a possession state that is saved, and sometimes not. Let's start with an example. So the simplest way of giving something to the player is to create here an entity called Pickable, so Pickable Treasure. And here you need to choose which item, and the items listed here are the ones that exist in your items folder here. So for example, let's give some money to the player, gem here, and let's just press OK and see what happens. Okay, there we go. I just picked the rupee, it disappeared, and I have my rupee counter here was changed to 1. So this is really the simplest way of creating a treasure. So if you have a look at your item here, this is just a Lua script. There is not really a UI for items. It's everything defined by one script for each item. Your item is an object here that is passed out as a parameter to your script, and then there are some events. Here the most important thing is this event on obtaining, which is called when the player obtains the item, obtains one instance of this item. So the whole script is executed when the game starts. This function is called as initialization time, so only once for the whole game, even if you create multiple rupees. This is called when the game starts, and it defines some properties to this item. And this is what happens every time the player obtains one example of this item, no matter if it was picked on the ground or in a treasure chest, which we will see in a second, or some other ways. But here we just call this built-in function add money on the game object, and that's pretty much it. You can see that there are actually multiple variants of this particular item here, and you can define which variant you want to give to the player here in this second parameter. Some items only have one variant, and some have multiple variants. So this one was created with actually 6 variants. So if you try to give, I don't know, variant number 2, this color was changed, and we will see why. But this purple gem corresponds to 5, and the green one is 1. This is actually the amounts defined in this list here. So variant 1 will give 1 gem, variant 2 will give 5, variant 3 will give 20, and so on. so you can really just customize here what happens. Anyway, in general, this function on obtaining is called when the player obtains one instance of this item, and you just define what happens. So this is the place where you define the effect of an item. And there is nothing really saved about rupees. In the script, we don't save anything special. We just add the money to the game object, so it's actually the game that will save how much money the player has. If I pick some rupees and then if I save, my rupee counter is, my money counter is automatically saved. Let's reload the game. But the rupees themselves, they are still here, as you can see, because these, so the state of these treasures was not saved, but the rupee counter is itself saved. So yeah, you should not be confused between these two information, because actually, before creating a treasure chest, I need to show you that you can save the state of whether this particular pickable item was indeed picked or not. And you need to, if you want to save it, you need to choose a variable name where the Boolean state of this pickable treasure will be saved. So it has to be unique in your whole game, so I like to prefix it with the same name as the map, and then let's say purple gem. I don't know, for example. Is it purple or blue? As you want. Somewhere in between. I don't know how to call this color in English, but okay. So anyway, this one should have been saved and not this one, so I am leaving the map, I'm coming back, and indeed the left one is no longer here and this one is back, and the third one I didn't even pick it the first time, but yeah, I think you understand the concept. Let's create a treasure chest this time. So treasure chests, you should choose a chest sprite, that's the first thing to do, and same thing, which treasure do you want to put in your chest? Let's say the sword, and since this is an important item, probably it will be saved. Outside one sword chest. Let's call this Boolean variable that way. Okay. What will happen if I pick this chest, if I open this chest, and this tree is annoying? Yeah, so I'm brandishing a sword and that's it, and I can use it. Same thing, we can, oops, sorry about that, we can check that the state of the chest was saved. Yes, it was. Okay, cool. I want to fix the tree. If you look at the sword script here, it says that the possession state of the sword is saved. That was not the case of rupees, because you want to remember which variant of the sword you possess. It can be 0 if you don't have it. It's an integer number. It can be 0 if you don't have the sword at all. It can be 1 if you have variant 1, or 2 if you have the second sword, and so on. But in this quest, there is actually only one variant of sword, I think, in the default quest, but in general, this is an item that has a notion of possession state. so we need to save its current variant. Same if it's an important weapon, you will save if the hero possesses the weapon or not. And this is an important distinction between whether the player has the weapon and whether the chest was open or not. It can be important to have this distinction because for example, you could, if you have multiple variants of a sword in your game, there will be multiple chests, multiple treasures. Each one will have its own Boolean state saved, so whether the chest was open or not. And but the current variant of the sword possessed by the player will be only one number. Sword 1, sword 2, something like that, or 0 if he doesn't have it. Another example is that sometimes maybe you can imagine that the player gets an important weapon in a chest, in a treasure chest, and later it gets removed. I don't know, something happens in the scenario. Let's say his sword was stolen, or if it's another weapon. Let's say at some point he loses the weapon. We would not want the chest to go back to closed and to be obtainable again. So it's really two different. My point is that these are really two different information to be saved. One is the Boolean state of the chest or of the pickable treasure. It's really the same, whether the player picked the treasure or not. And the second information is the possession state of the item here. So whether you have a sword and which one. And this one is not a Boolean but an integer. Okay. So that's it for the part about saving items. It can be tricky sometimes. And I haven't talked at all about sprites. As you can see, my gems have two different colors, and even more than that, but I use only two different variants here in this example, and there is even an animation here. And yeah, if you saw the previous tutorial about sprites, you can guess that this is just a sprite. So unlike most entities that have a sprite checkbox and combo box here, like teletransporters or chests, you cannot directly choose the sprite of your treasure here, because it's automatic. It will always be a sprite that has a specific name, entities/items. You don't have a choice. Sorry. This sprite must exist, and it should have as many animations as you have as the items that you have here. So for each item you should have an animation with the same name as that item. So here an animation called gem, and for each variant of your item we use the concept of direction to represent the different variants. So here we decided that there would be 6 variants, and they all have different animations. So whenever you create a pickable treasure, that sprite will be automatically used. And in the chest also, as you noticed, we also saw the sprite. Actually, it was brandished by the player. Let's change it to, for example, a gem, but this time I no longer save the chest state. I'm seeing the same sprite again. I'm brandishing the treasure. And a small detail is that when you pick up a rupee on the ground, on the floor, the hero does not brandish the rupee, the gem, but if it was in a chest, he always brandishes the treasure. And this is because we defined our treasure to have these properties. We decided that the hero should not brandish that treasure when he picks the treasure on the floor, on the ground. For the sword, it's different. We did not call that particular function because we always want to brandish a sword. It's an important item. So if I put this back to sword, and let's say this guy is also a sword, unlike gems, the sword will always be brandished even when you just pick it on the floor. Strangely enough, there is no sound when you brandish the sword, but that can be easily customized. This code decided that there should be no sound, but probably it's not a great idea. We should play the sound treasure. You can even select a different sound depending on whether you brandish the treasure or you just pick it on the floor. Okay. Last thing, you can also show a dialogue whenever the hero obtains a treasure. And to do that, you just have to create a dialogue that has, like the sprite, it should have a specific name, and that name should always be _treasure dot followed by the ID of your item, so gem or sword, I don't know, let's start with gem, dot the variant number, so don't forget the variant number. So this syntax is mandatory. By convention, the dialog IDs that start with an underscore character are reserved for dialogs that will be called automatically by the engine. So we never show explicitly this dialog. We don't have to make an NPC or a script start showing this dialog. We just define it with this name, and it will be automatically called, assuming that the item name here, the item ID here, so the file name is correct and the variant is correct. Okay, let's say you found a gem. Woohoo! Yeah, I will not see the dialog because this is still the sword, and like the brandishing animation, this dialog will only be shown when you are actually brandishing the gem, the treasure. And since we decided that rupees that are on the floor should not be brandished, we will only see the dialog when we obtain it from a chest here, for example. You found a gem, yoo-hoo. Okay, cool. Something that might be tricky is that if you create subfolders of items, if you have a lot and you organize them, and we have some resource packs that do that, then the ID of your item becomes something with a folder name inside. For example, it can be in some resource pack something like equipment/rupee instead of just rupee, or equipment/gem. And in this case, you want to call your dialog. Sorry, this one. It would be equipment/gem gem. So it makes this whole dialog ID a bit weird because it's separated by dots. So it's treasure dot the ID of the item and then the variant. It's a bit, it's easy to get it wrong. It's, let's say it's for historical reason that we have this separation using dots. That was the case long before it was even possible to create folders inside items. But yeah, if you have trouble with showing treasure dialogues, it's often because of this mistake. Okay, so we've seen we've seen two forms of treasures, of giving items to the player. So pickable treasures, chests. There are also enemies. We should mention them, of course. We will make a tutorial about enemies quite soon, but when you create an enemy, it's more or less the same UI as in chests. There is a part for the treasure, so you choose your treasure, the variant, and whether you want the Boolean state of this dropped treasure to be saved. Yeah, whether the hero obtained that treasure from that enemy. You can also give treasures from shop items, so it's a bit of a legacy entity type because it's now easy. It would be easy to recreate it in pure Lua, but just so you know, you can also give a treasure like that and assign a price, and you can try that. It's always these three same fields: treasure, variant, and do you want to save it or not. So shop treasures can be used to implement shops easily without any code if you want. And the last way of giving a treasure to the player is directly from some Lua script. For example, if you talk to a non-playing character, let's say after the dialogue of the character, they give you something. To do that, you can simply call the function, I think, hero start treasure. You can see that in the documentation, and it's a function that takes three parameters: the treasure ID, the variant, and the save game variable, which is optional. So always these three things, actually. No matter if the treasure comes from a pickable treasure, a chest, an enemy, a shop item, or directly from a script. Treasures always work the same. I hope this was clear. Let us know if you want someone to help with creating your items scripts. Don't forget to always create one animation for each item. Here it's not completely done actually in this default quest because we don't have the one for the money bag. It's not included here, so that's a small mistake. And on the contrary, we have a bomb one but no bomb item yet. Just adapt all of this to your need, remove what you don't need, and create an animation in this entity sprite item for each item, and also a dialog called _treasure dot the name, the ID of the item dot the variant of the item. And if you do all of that, you should be good. I hope this was clear about treasures. One of the most difficult things is to get familiar with everything that can be saved, because you can save the possession state of some items. Some other items don't have a possession state. For example, gem, there is no notion of whether I possess the rupee or not. It's not a unique item. But there is something saved. It's the total amount of money in the game and the state of the, optionally, the state of the treasures themselves. So it's really easy to get confused with everything that can be or cannot be saved related to items. So hopefully you will find your way with these complications, and we are always here to help on the Discord. Thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Bye.